Hey up. Here we are then, at the end of Phase 1 of the Hard Gore collection. Can you believe it? And to play us out, we're heading back to the 90s with Hellmaster, also known as Them and Soul Stealer. This is a 1992 horror film directed by Douglas Schulze, who hasn't really done much else. This was his directorial debut. It looks like he's done a few other low-budget, poorly rated horror films, and that's about it really. We actually get a few names in this one as well. John Saxon is a name and a face you'll probably recognise. He's been in a bunch of classic horror films. Just to name a few, we get Nightmare on Elm Street, Dusk Till Dawn and Black Christmas. You might recognise him. And then there's also David MG, I don't know if I'm saying his last name right, MG, who's another face you might recognise. He was in Dawn of the Dead and Basket Case 2. So we do get a few names popping up in this, a few horror classics, I guess. For the horror fans out there, you might spot a few faces in this that you're like, oh, I know that guy. Might be a good sign? Who knows? I mean, I don't know anything about this film at all. All I can tell you is it's clearly trying to evoke Hellraiser with its cover. Is it any good though? Let's take a look, shall we?
Joel, what brings you out here?
Do I need a reason to see my best friend?
Now, Joel, I only seem to be your best friend when you need something.
Shelley.
They left me no choice. They pressured me. You have to understand.
Something weird is going on around here.
The only thing weird around here is you, Drake.
Jesse.
We follow a reporter who is investigating a strange new drug that seems to be affecting the homeless population, mutating them and twisting the bodies into deformed, weird beings. He's led to a high school where it seems a professor with psychic powers is giving this drug to the students, transforming them into mindless superhuman zombies who will do his evil bidding, whilst he wanders around shouting Nietzsche quotes at whoever will listen. So now the reporter, along with a few students, one of whom being psychic, have to try and stop this evil professor before he infects the entire campus. It's a bit of a mess. There is potential here, but it's a little all over the place. It's far too eager. The first 20 minutes skip proper character introductions and all that sort of jazz, and it just throws you straight in to the action with a ton of characters, and it really jumps the gun, and then it sort of realises it by about the 40-minute mark, and it sort of fumbles a little. And from then on, it's just a slow, painful, bizarre crawl to the ending, unfortunately. It's only 92 minutes long, but that still feels a little too long for this film, especially with how much it rushes at the beginning. It just comes across as amateur and maybe a little eager. Yeah, it's a mess. It's definitely a mess.
This isn't a social excursion.
Don't mind him, too much caffeine.
I don't believe this.
What?
Those rumors about the drug experiments. It's no rumor, Barb.
What are you talking about?
The acting's a bit of a mix in this one. All the students, the younger actors, are absolutely appalling. It does lead to some funny line reads here and there, which is quite good. But then you bring in like the actors who've been in other horror films, and they're not amazing, but you can tell they're good. But you put them next to these terrible kid actors, and it's super jarring to watch, and it kind of brings everybody down. But as I said, the odd funny line here and there is a positive from this. It's not the worst acting I've ever seen, but there's some pretty bad acting in this. The gore is pretty good, but there is a major issue, and that is that the film is so dark you can barely see what the hell's going on most of the time. And it's a shame because some of this gore actually seems like it would be pretty decent. There's like some really standout moments. It's like a good face melt, just the general design of the drug takers and stuff. There is some decent stuff in here, you just can't see what the hell it is, to be honest, and it's a shame. So the main monster, or who you would assume the main monster is based off all the promotional stuff, this fella, Pinhead knockoff, he's called Bobby, and I'll be referring to him as such. But he doesn't look very good in stills, he also doesn't look very good in motion. The sort of latex on his face is pretty naff. And to say how much he's plastered all over the promotional stuff, every poster, every piece of artwork, every release of this film that I've seen has this dude front and centre. And honestly, he's barely in it, really. He's not in it much at all. The first few times you see him as well, he's just in cars. He just seems to be in the back of people's cars all the time, which is really weird. I thought he was just going to be a guy in the car, and he's not even really the main bad guy or anything like that. He's clearly just been used to have that Hellraiser reference, I guess. Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame. It's not the worst put together film, I guess. There's some nice use of colour, some interesting camera angles here and there, some decent editing. It's just a little amateur-y, I guess. I think it's more just that it's not been enhanced in any way, and it just looks pretty, like, it's pretty dirty to look at. It's pretty nasty and grimy and contrasty and stuff. But when the lighting lightens up a little and you can actually see what's happening in the frame, there's some nice stuff going on. It's not awful. It's not going to blow you away or anything. It's not mind-blowing stuff. But you know, there's more to it than you'd imagine, I guess. The sound, though, can't really say the same for that. It's not been cleaned up like at all, though, like even in the initial edit, I'm assuming, because you can hear the hiss changing between shots sometimes, and it's just not great. The music as well, I couldn't even tell you what the music is in this, to be honest. I only watched it recently and it's just gone completely. Nondescript, I guess is how I'd describe it. Maybe that's a good thing. It didn't stand out for being super jarring or anything like that, but it also didn't leave any sort of impression on me whatsoever. I said though, the main issue with this film, really, the main thing holding it back from being good is just this weird sort of rush that it has in the first 20 minutes. Like, you can't figure out who's who or what's what. It's a lot of plot and a lot of characters just shoved in your face in the first 20 minutes. Just here's all this, here's all this. And by the time you've sort of acclimatized to it, it's sort of lost its steam somewhat, and it doesn't know what to do with itself, and it feels like the film itself is panicking and it's just trying to throw whatever it can at you. Psychic powers, yeah, sod it, get that in there. And yeah, it feels panicked, it feels rushed, and it's a shame. It's a shame.
Joey, my monkey man.
What? Damn it. I'm a fucking cripple.
Hey, mister. Will you play with me?
So let's talk about the Hellraiser angle for this, shall we? Because as I've said many a time, this guy, Bobby, being plastered all over the promotional stuff, is clearly trying to make you think Hellraiser. They even changed the name of this film to Hellmaster quite late on in production. Again, it's trying everything it can from just the promotional stuff alone to make you think of Hellraiser. Now, the film itself doesn't really have much connection to Hellraiser. There's the odd bit, there's the gore, the body horror element. I guess there's a bit of a supernatural thing going on as well, but I never really thought Hellraiser, outside of when this guy was on screen, I never really thought Hellraiser. It made me think more of Nightmare on Elm Street and the sequels, because again, you've got the gore, you've got the bad guy wandering around shouting stuff. In this case, he's shouting Nietzsche quotes, which isn't as good as Freddy wandering around quipping, but you know, you get what you get. And then you've got the sort of psychic element to it. You've got the, you know, the girl who's got the psychic abilities, using them against the bad guy who also has some form of supernatural ability. Very Dream Warrior, which isn't a bad thing. I quite like some of the Nightmare on Elm Street sequels, and I think it could work in this sort of thing, but it's not great, to be honest. I think it's just because of how it's set up and it rushes it. Like, Nightmare on Elm Street waited until the sequels to push in all this psychic ability, Dream Warrior stuff. And it works because you've had plenty of time to get used to the characters and the strange dream logic of it. Whereas this is trying to shove it all into a 90-minute film, and I think it trips over itself trying to do so, really. Nietzsche. Let's discuss that angle of this film, because it's quite a prevalent part of it. There's a lot of this guy wandering around shouting generic, standard Nietzsche quotes. Now, philosophy and horror, shove them together and they can work really well, I think. I think you can get something really interesting out of that. But you need to delve more into the philosophy than this film dares to do. This film is basically just the bad guy wandering around shouting Nietzsche quotes almost as a soundboard for generic smart bad guy is bad because he leans into nihilism, basically. And they use that as well as a sort of a, she's good because she sees the good in the world, he's bad because he likes his nihilistic existentialist Nietzsche quotes. And it's super shallow. It's very shallow. Like, there's no exploration of the ideas. I'm quite a fan of philosophy. I spare time, like to read philosophy books and stuff. I'm not an expert on the subject. Don't think that. But I find an interest in it. I'm interested to see what people have said about stuff, I guess. And it's a shame because it doesn't really delve much into any of the ideas that Nietzsche had outside of the generic God is dead, blah blah blah, let's mutate and make Supermen. And you know, yeah, like that's, everybody sort of knows that side to it. It sort of removes any sort of nuance from certain ideas, and it feels a bit too lazy for its own good, really. It could have been good, it really could have been good. But then at the same time, you could have had this dude like quoting whoever, really. As long as there's some sort of like nihilistic slant to it, you could just have him quoting whatever. It doesn't really make much of a difference. They chose Nietzsche because he's a bit of a popular one, a bit of a punching bag for like, oh, this guy is just a miserable sod, blah blah blah. And yeah, I don't know. It's a shame, really. I was expecting, when it started, I expected a little more from this angle, and of course, we didn't get more from this angle. We didn't get much at all from it, really. Oh well. Okay then, time for the print. And it's a weird one. It's not very good at all, really. I said already that it is far too dark, and it really is. Crushed blacks all over the place, super contrasty, but you also get colour bleed as well, so it just turns into a muddy mess. Especially like any dark scene in this, and you're going to struggle to see what the hell's happening. And it's a shame because there's some interesting stuff knocking about in this, some of the gore and that. It'd have been nice to actually see it. Top of that, it's grainy, muddy, just really not a good looking print at all. And every now and then with the editing, like it'll change to a new scene and there'll be a flash of one frame from earlier in that previous scene, just for one frame, and it's really jarring when it happens. It could be a frame rate conversion issue, I know that can happen sometimes, or it could just be badly edited and put together, who knows. Sound's not great either, it cuts out every now and again and the volume's way up and down and there's hissing in the background. It's a mess, it's a complete mess of a print. And on the disc, we get chapter select and a trailer for this film, and that is your lot. Of course it is. Right then, time for the case. The cover looks super cheap, as you can see. It's such a low quality image, it just looks terrible. Back of the case is fine for the synopsis, but it mixes up the actors' names and the films they've been in. Saxon was in Elm Street, and MG was in Dawn of the Dead. Really not good that they've done that. The runtime is also wrong, being off by around 7 minutes. I also hate that the back image of Bobby is the same as the front, but slightly further away. It's just really lazy. Yeah, they didn't care with this case at all. Lastly, this is another of the ILC releases. Overall then, it's not great. It does have a few things going for it. The gore seems pretty interesting, and there's some ideas that work quite well. It has its entertaining moments for sure, but for the most part it's a very messy film that's far too over the top, far too rushing about, trying to get everything in, trying to cram a bunch of weird stuff in at the end. It's just a mess. It's just a mess, unfortunately. It's a shame. There is some good ideas in this, but it just wasn't executed well enough. I'd definitely say though, go check out Hellraiser or the Nightmare on Elm Street series. If you haven't seen those, you probably have, but if you haven't, check those out over this. This doesn't really get a recommendation from me. There's a reason those are classic horror films and this isn't. If you are in the market for this film, this is your lot in the UK, and it's not great. The print's pretty bad, hard to make out what's happening. It's just cheap and naff. It might be alright for a 50p pickup at a charity shop or something, but I wouldn't pay more than that. If you're willing to import, Vinegar Syndrome have put out a Blu-ray in the US. It's pricey because it's an import, obviously, but it is a nice 4K remaster, probably got special features. It's probably more worth your time than this. You might actually make the film watchable. It's never going to be an amazing film, even if you brighten some scenes and, you know, clean it up a little. It's never going to be like a 5-star film, but it might change it from being bad mediocre to mediocre good. Who knows, but that's if you're willing to pay. So, yeah, not the best way to cap off the series, but we have seen a hell of a lot worse. And that's it for phase 1 of the hard gore films, but there are still some hard gore films left to look at, but not in this capacity. So next episode is going to be a sort of summing up video where we take a look back at the phase 1 selection that we had. We discuss good, bad and all that. I'll do a little ranking of the films, and we'll talk about what's coming next in phase 2 of the hard gore reviews. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you then.